So filmmaker Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland reinvent the zombie genre for the 21st century in a film that's become far more relevant 20 years on. So let's delve into the terrifying realities of 28 days later. In the United Kingdom, a group of misguided animal activists free a caged chimp infected with a virus called Rage from a medical research lab, against the vehement warnings of one of the scientists. When London bike courier Jim wakes from a coma a month later, he finds the city all but deserted. He soon finds himself on the run from ravenous single-minded victims of the Rage virus, until he's saved by survivors Cillian and Mark. They explain that the virus spread quickly, leading to emergency evacuations, but not everyone could find their way off to the mainland. Since then, they've had to fend for themselves, avoiding infection with gas masks and heavy coverings. Needing to know about his parents, Jim goes to their home with Mark and Cillian. He finds that his parents took their own lives, seeing no salvation from this epidemic, with their son lying in a coma. That night, the infected crash the house, attacking all three of them. While Jim survives unscathed, Mark is exposed to the virus, and Cillian butchers him without a second thought. Eventually, Jim and Cillian see a flat with Christmas lights flashing in the distance and attempt to reach it. However, the infected chase them all the way up the complex, but a riot-gear-clad Frank fends them off and welcomes the two of them alongside his daughter Hannah. Frank reveals he's picked up a radio transmission from Army Brigade, holed up in Manchester, promising the answer to infection. They soon take off in Frank's cab to reach the source of the transmission, but not without many harrowing and frightening encounters along the way. Worse yet, once they reach the army encampment, Frank is infected by a drop of blood to his eye, turning him rabid in seconds, until he's gunned down by the soldiers. Ultimately, the army encampment proves to be less than what they might have hoped for. With minimal men, some armaments, an infected soldier chained up for study, and no cure for the virus at all. In fact, Major Henry West reveals to Jim that to stave off the feeling of hopelessness, he promises men women to bring a future they can foresee by repopulating the human race, by whatever means necessary. This puts Jim into a panic, trying to escape with Cillian and Hannah, but he doesn't get very far. Yet when they attempt to execute Jim in the woods, he takes off and taps into his inner violent survivalist instincts to try saving Cillian and Hannah. In releasing the infected Private Michalak to ravage the fortified mansion, he intends to bring fate down upon those who have become inhuman savages themselves. So 28 days later saw its initial UK theatrical release on the 1st of November 2002, followed up on North American release on June 27, 2003, and was met with widespread critical and commercial success of a budget of $8 million, and went on to gross over $84.6 million at the worldwide box office, more than 10 times the return on its budget. And the film was such a fantastic type of thing for Danny Boyle because he's such an interesting filmmaker. It's not something you can kind of pigeonhole towards a genre or a certain style of film. He's always kind of a little experimental on different things. He's doing Trainspotting, does Shadow Grave, he does all these different things, Sunshine, and all these other very interesting different types of films over his career. And this was something he kind of picked up from Alex Garland, who he adapted his novel The Beach for his previous film, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and they got working together. And Garland was very much the one who was very much the zombie genre fan. He was the one who knew everything about the whole thing, and of course the most prolific thing in the genre was the George Romero Dead trilogy from Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. And that was kind of the main sort of driving inspiration behind what he did, but it was kind of feeling like the zombie genre kind of faded away to a certain degree until he kind of got latched onto the Resident Evil video games and well, this is supercharging a lot of things for a lot of people here. This is really exciting type of stuff. So he crafted his entire screenplay and brought it to Danny Boyle. And Boyle was just he was fascinated by what he did here. He kind of relied so much on Garland on the knowledge of the genre to kind of inform where he wanted to go direction-wise and how he wanted to approach the film so much. And so these guys really work so very well together. And the fact is, Alex Garland is a fantastic writer. So like after this, he works again with Boyle on Sunshine. Then he goes off and writes the Dread film for 2012, starring Carl Urban. Then he writes and directs Ex Machina, Annihilation, just like constantly building up a great resume of just fantastic pieces of work all over the place. And it's no different here. Does a wonderful job just meshing the themes and ideas of this entire genre here and just bring it into that 21st century realm. Make it a little bit grittier, a little bit more primordial, something a little bit more real, something more, much closer to like real life scientific fears that when you watch if you have the DVD or the Blu-ray, if you watch the featurette that's on there, they spend like 10 minutes just talking about the scientific inevitability of a pandemic actually happening. And this is in 2003. And the fact is, it didn't take even 20 years to get to something like that. It's like a lot of people were watching this film in the pandemic that we had recently, watching the whole thing where there's like empty streets of London. Everything's barren, everything's evacuated, desolate. A plague has ravaged the entire landscape and that type of stuff. So like if it hit very strong, it was like a real cold wake-up call in that regard. And it's like the fact that they kind of went right into that type of quality and achieved so many things with this film, but really kind of tapped into saying that just felt that scientists kind of knew that was kind of inevitable, that was going to eventually happen at some point in time, and eventually did happen, and was very, very true to life at how it kind of reflected the visuals of what we kind of lived through for a certain point in time there. A very, very striking type of thing that comes from Alex Garland researching things and getting so much into that genre and bringing Danny Boyle into the mix here to really achieve something that is very much a visionary masterwork of a type of film here. And the particular type of thing with this film, how they actually went about the production of it, because they got some funding from the National Lottery in the UK through one of the producers, and they tried getting some backing through Universal Pictures, but at least in terms of distribution, landed Fox Searchlight. But he wanted to go for a certain quality of the entire film with only an $8 million budget and working with what they wanted to achieve with those kind of desolate streets in these main areas of London and stuff like that. They knew they had to shoot fast. They couldn't hold up traffic for hours and hours and whatnot. They had to kind of snap together real fast, so they chose to shoot on standard definition digital video at the time, mini DV. And they chose pretty much the premier camera in that regard. The prosumer grade field was the Canon XL1E, the European model that would run at 25 frames per second. And they had a whole host of these things. They had like 9 cameras going at certain points of time. But the fact of the matter is, if they shot it on film takes a lot longer to actually set up. They set up the cartridges, roll the film, the entire thing, set up all the different things with all these different cameras to make sure everything kind of works in that regard. But if you got a mini DV camera, you can get going shooting in like 2 minutes. It's really fast and efficient, stuff like that, so they could have the police kind of hold off traffic at certain points of time for just a couple minutes. Just hold things off to get the couple shots here and there and everywhere, and then get everything else moving back into its normal flow of the day. So it's like, it was just a very particular interesting way to approach it, because it's just a few years before you really get the advent of the HD video stuff. You had George Lucas and Michael Mann and Robert Rodriguez kind of pioneering that edge of anything like that. But it kind of fell on that sort of Robert Rodriguez mentality that you'd end up having, like working at the speed of thought. You don't have to wrangle around with the laboratory and all these different things with the dealing with all the different film stocks and whatnot. You could really just shoot as soon as you thought of something and kind of set everything up very quickly in that regard. So it made a very interesting film, but also aesthetically, it creates a very interesting look for the entire film. Now, of course, since it's standard definition video, that's actually being de-interlaced for the entire film format and stuff like that, so it's not high resolution. It's very much a constrained format in that regard, but I like what it brings to the feeling of the entire film. It brings this sort of bleak sensibility, this kind of melancholy. The colors it brings off, the vibe of the whole thing, the certain dynamic range that it does have is very interesting. How it brings forth a mood and an atmosphere and all the different things. It makes you feel something watching the images in the film, how it plays towards the landscapes and how it kind of envelops you into a certain feeling overall in the whole thing. Just like it kind of washes over you, this sort of imagery that kind of evokes a certain thing to kind of drain the sort of hope, the humanity, stuff like that out of you, watching the whole thing to make you feel the same thing. A lot of the characters are feeling inside the film itself. They're having that sort of bleak sensibility about everything that's going down around them. And even how the film shot with camera angles and camera moves overall it does show this being shot by very talented filmmakers. People know what they're doing with it. And cinematographer in Anthony Dodd Mantle, who I'm working later on more with Danny Boyle, also with like Ron Howard, Oliver Stone, a lot of talented people in that regard. So he's very much a cinematographer who knows what to do with it and knows how to handle the equipment so much. Because you can still have a guy who knows how to work with film, but if he doesn't quite know how to function with the equipment of the digital video, it could come off a little messy. But he knows exactly what he's doing in terms of getting the right exposure, getting the right qualities of the lighting overall. And the Canon XL1 is such a leading edge camcorder for its time. The fact that it just made this entire prosumer grade digital video sort of line possible for so many different manufacturers. It was very much modular. You could change out lenses for the entire thing, and so many different inputs on the entire thing, such as XLR cables. You could do a lot of different things with the whole thing. A lot of things could be disassembled and moved around and change things around, just different components overall. Just made it a very versatile piece of machinery to use for filmmaking and videography and stuff like that. So it was very much the exact right tool for Danny Boyle to use for this entire attention here and do so many great things in that regard. And with that, the entire film just has this very cutting-edge indie film vibe to it. It's like it's so much ambitious in what it's trying to capture, and the fact that the cinematography captures so many interesting feelings. The fact you start with this sort of sadness and loneliness all over the place when Jim's kind of wandering around just trying to figure out what's going on here, and you kind of morph into this more beautiful type of scenery in some ways. We're out in the fields and whatnot, and they're watching the horses run free. It's a beautiful moment. But then you get much more back in the horror, the terrifying type of stuff. The fact that the tone evolves from all different things. It goes from desolation and emptiness and isolation to just utter fear and just terrifying type of stuff. But it has, in the core of it, this evolving sensibility of family. Finding people and bringing forth that sense of humanity back into these characters, and still finding that in this post-apocalyptic sort of landscape in that regard. It's great type of stuff, how you get so much richness out of the story here. And the visual veracity they put forth when they have all these different infected attacks and everything, they have all this great darkness and the backlighting and just very much terrifying moments overall. The fact that they use particular ways of shooting with certain frame rates and shutter speeds, stuff like that, to make it a little bit more chaotic to a certain degree, while still maintaining a certain geography, a certain way to make sure that you still understood what was happening on screen, but still make it much more frenetic to a certain degree, using technical acumen to create that entire effect there. And the fact that a lot of the affected people are actually like just athletes. They kind of brought in the entire thing. They could run real fast and just really make it very much an intense experience, having these sort of infected with all the bloodshot, ghastly, gruesome type of things going on with their visages and stuff like that. It would just make it just an utterly terrifying type of thing every single time Andy's came around. Just great type of stuff, just really, really good type of stuff. It just creates so much of just the utter primal fear in the entire film, just seeing just the blood gushing out of some of them. And all these different things, just like the ravenous so much, are just unhinged savage beasts, and it's just terrifying to see that they've just been boiled down with this psychological virus. Is what Danny Boyle calls it, a psychological virus. It just robs you of everything except the most primal urges and instincts you possibly have to just be an utterly unhinged animal in such a degree. It's great type of stuff. Just take that zombie sensibility, which is this lumbering undead type of creature, and move it over to something just like it's still a living, breathing person, but so stripped down to something that doesn't resemble anything of humanity anymore. It's just a great type of thing. It's just a very smart way to reapproach those ideas and bring it in to feel so much more terrifying overall. Is great type of stuff. Another great thing here is composer John Murphy, who previously worked with Guy Ritchie, worked again with Danny Boyle, worked with Michael Mann, Matthew Vaughn, and more recently has been working very regularly with James Gunn. It does a very unique score here. It mixes guitars with percussion and synthesizers and orchestral music. Always seems to create a very varied tone on the whole thing. There's so many different things in terms of like sort of a melancholy sensibility at certain points in time early on in the film, but then you get the much more heightened type of stuff, much more pulsating sort of cues that builds up the tension, the danger, the entire threatening quality of the entire film, but it has some very light moments too. Adding in so many different things that kind of bring up this sort of lightness in the entire film so much. Even a couple of licensed cues from like Brian Eno and other people here and there add into the tapestry, the mixture of the different qualities that Boyle wants to kind of lay across this sort of soundscape of the entire film here. I think it does very, very well. Unfortunately, the soundtrack is out of print. You can find a couple copies here and there. The cheapest one I found on eBay right now is about $20, which is not bad, but some things go up to about $55, and there's not a lot of copies available in that regard. It's nowhere on streaming. You'll find some people kind of uploading them here on YouTube to kind of check out some of the cues, but it's one of the things in the entire pantheon, the entire film, that's not terribly well available, but it's an interesting listen if you want to go in and check in a couple of the cues here and there. It's very good type of stuff, but getting to the cast of the entire film here, starting out with Cillian Murphy, who has gotten a lot of acclaim at the point in time I'm actually doing this entire video here, right across near the Oscars of 2024, and so he's got a storied career. He's risen up so very well, and the fact is, he's showed so much in this film that really kind of broke him through, got a lot of eyes on him through this entire performance here as Jim. I very much like how he's injected the entire film, because he's been in a coma for a couple weeks and he wakes up in the sort of late stages of everything. Everyone's kind of gone through this harrowing, traumatic experience. They've all been hardened to it, or they've gone through a certain level of terror. He's kind of in this situation where he still has this tether to humanity, that warmth, that heart, that caring. He's not been jaded by everything that's gone down here and been in this like instinctual survivalist mentality and whatnot. When you have that with Selena, it's very much an interesting character in that regard. It kind of keeps that connection, kind of keeps that thing at the heart of the entire film here. You can still attach yourself and be relatable to this character. Everything he's doing here just feels like it's a real reaction to everything that's kind of befalling him, and he's trying to absorb and kind of process everything that's gone down and just try to make sense of everything like that. So it's like a very good thing to have a character like this in the film, to be that kind of conduit for the audience and have such a great actor in that regard to inject all these character qualities that you need into the forefront and have him express that so much in his facials, all the different things he has to do in the whole thing. And even as he's gone through all these experiences, kind of adapting to this new world, this new situation he's into, he still maintains that tether to humanity, even though he has to deal with that situation where he's in the petrol station, the kid who's been transformed by the virus, he has to kill that kid, as kill or be killed. And I like that he carries that all the way up until he has a conversation with Major West. And he kind of expels it all to him. It's like, you had to do some things you're not comfortable doing to survive this entire situation. I like that they injected that scene, both the one he has to kill the kid and the one he has to talk with Major West there, where he didn't impart that to Selena or anyone else in that regard. It's kind of giving off this guy who has a little bit more of a inside knowledge of what you have to do to survive in this situation, and someone who's not quite as emotionally connected to in that regard. There's a little bit more of a straight honesty in that regard. But as the entire thing flips on its head with the entire soldiers in that regard, he just becomes this unleashed, righteous savage of the entire film. The fact is, he's a guy who's bringing forth the fate of all these guys. He's kind of unleashing the fate that's kind of awaiting him, the kind of thing they've asked for. Because they've revealed their intentions here, that like they're going to use these two women to propagate the species again and just do it without their consent, and just like it's terrifying type of stuff. To see that they've kind of sunk it down to this sort of almost sociopathic mindset in that regard, where just as everything kind of eaten away at their humanity here, where you still have a character like Jim imparting that stuff, keeping hold on that, and also making that much more of a turn with Selena in that regard, bringing more of that out of herself instead of having that hardened exterior the entire time, kind of brings those qualities out of her. I like the quality that even though he still has that sensibility within himself, he has to kind of tap into something else, that survivalist mentality, and kind of turn everything back around on these guys. I like the fact that Cillian Murphy just injects himself into the physicality of that quality of the character there. I've always kind of looked at it as like, it's almost like a horror movie version of First Blood. A guy out there in the wilderness, not a lot of things to call upon to kind of exact any sort of retribution or anything like that, but the fact is he's able to be resourceful and tap into a certain mindset that's kind of, again, a little bit like the Infect in that regard, but not losing the humanity that's defined him up to this point in time. So it's a wonderful performance for Cillian Murphy. He does a fantastic job. Just really made a breakout role for himself in this entire film, backed by a fantastically written character and directed to such a great degree by Danny Boyle. And Naomie Harris is one of those actresses that's like, I know she's so fantastic. And she appeared in Miami Vice for Michael Mann a couple years after this, also was in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, and she's just done great work all over the place. I just know that she's so extremely talented, and she shows that so much here as Selena. The fact, again, she's gone through this entire thing every step of the way and had to learn how to survive in these dire situations where it's like it's dog eat dog. Everyone's kind of has to fend for themselves. They can't really rely on too many other people. She's got Mark, who doesn't last that long in the film, and when the fact that comes out when he gets slashed and bitten and whatnot, she doesn't hesitate. That shows so much of this degradation of humanity that you have in the entire film here, that are have to devolve to a certain degree to survive so much as they can. That the fact is, when you go through the journey of her and Jim in the entire film, and that kind of brings more out of her character, kind of break down the hardened, cutthroat sort of exterior she has in this whole thing that she's been driven to, and kind of tap more into the deeper emotions, or much more further down there's like she has been through a traumatic experience, and I feel that's very subtle in the performance. You can just feel it. She doesn't have to convey anything like that. She doesn't have to say like I have PTSD or anything like that. It's like you can read it in the quality of her performance here, what she's doing from beat to beat and reacting to these situations. You definitely feel like she's closed herself off completely emotionally, and it's very much a traumatic sort of response in that regard, and it takes Jim kind of connecting with her further and further the entire story here to really bring more of those deeper qualities of who she was beforehand out of herself. I just think Naomie here says, incredible job, incredible actress, wonderful work she does. And Brendan Gleeson, also know he's such a fantastic actor, doing so many diverse things over his career. Does a great job as Frank. It brings that absolutely needed brightness into the film. We have, again, all this bleakness, all this dire qualities, all this dangerous situations, everything he's getting injected into. It brings that hope of humanity, all that type of stuff, that qualities you want from this family dynamic you keep building up from this point forward with him and Hannah. It's wonderful type of stuff, what he injects into our film, with little things towards the end of his screen time there where he just gets a little bit frustrated. The desperation of the character kind of finally shows through when it's like they run to the bunker and the army base and they can't find anyone there, and he's just a little bit at his wit's end too much. So it's a hair trigger type of thing he's dealing with in this situation, because they all just want to get to something that feels like a sense of normality, a little sense of safety, anything like that. And they had their hopes kind of very much pinned on this whole thing. And he's been pinned on it for much longer than that. He's been hearing this radio broadcast for days and days and days, and wanted to act on it and find out what exactly they had at this location to kind of maybe be a bit of a safety for him. And so it's just like that last bit of thing. And when he gets hit with the blood in the eye, he just starts going all over the place like that, just like it's chilling stuff to really kind of inject, again, a little bit of trauma for the audience. If you've been connected to this character, you very much care for him, all the type of stuff, him and his daughter in that regard, is like creates so much of a emotional turmoil for the audience to go through in that regard, to lose that character at this point in time under those circumstances. Then of course the army comes in, shoots him and stuff like that after he's already been infected, but still a very traumatizing situation for Hannah, and it does take some toll on the audience as well. And I think Megan Burns also does a fantastic job here as Hannah, just having, again, very real reactions. All the different horrors that she's being injected into, all the things that are just happening to her. One, losing her father and being inserted in this entire situation where she's going to be sexually assaulted by all these guys. It's just like, it's a horrifying situation. The fact that Cillian is trying to protect her as much as she possibly can with whatever means. And so it's a very much, all that stuff keeps bonding these characters together so much. I like that quality of the film, that you keep bringing these characters closer and closer together to build a family of all these different people here. I like so much how that goes about. Of course, you get Christopher Eccleston, just excellent. Him as Major West. I like the quality of what they do with this character. To introduce him as sort of a gracious host. It feels like he's very welcoming. He creates some sort of sense of safety for these people, kind of welcoming into this entire thing. Even though he's kind of maybe not living up to your expectations of what we might have had here, stuff like that and whatnot, but I like the fact there's just a little bit of an undercurrent of unsettling morality here. When you introduce Jim to the chained up guy that got infected a couple of days ago, and there's like, oh, they're just kind of keeping here just to examine him and see how long it's going to take for him to starve to death and stuff like that. It's just like, it tinges you off to the fact that there's not quite all the screws exactly tightened up terribly well in these guys. There's something that's a little bit off kilter here to be a little bit weary of. Just have these little subtle things kind of building up as you go along into this last third of the entire film here. I like how that quality kind of just weaves around. He does such an expert job to kind of just tinge off the little things back and forth, making much more relatable, bringing him forward, kind of engaging a little bit with Jim, kind of being on the level with him, but also still just, this guy's definitely lost some sense of his own humanity as well. Just keep hitting that sort of button on this entire film. That's such a core quality of what this film is so much about, is recapturing that sensibility in these horrible times. Like, the one thing to hold on to, the one thing to focus on and kind of pivot the story around is people regaining their humanity, or the fact is they've lost it so much that they've lost all perspective. There's such a warped mindset going on here with Major West, that he's such a guy that's tipped off to almost a psychotic level here. It's like, oh, we've just lost all semblance of, like, there's anything else to live for in this world. It was all just here in this bunker. I gotta do the best things I can for these guys to give them some kind of hope, so I'm just gonna give them some women. Women to do whatever with. They're just bodies. They're just not even a thing and whatnot. They're just vessels to kind of do stuff with, and here, there, and everywhere. It's such just a vacant sort of thing on the entire level of this character, and the fact is, what they do up to that point and beyond that point, such a fascinating study of these kind of ideas going on the whole thing, where they have all that thing around the dinner table, where they're kind of talking about, in the grand scheme of the world, kind of humanity's only kind of been here for almost like a microsecond or something else like that. And because having these different perspectives kind of look upon the situation different types of ways is the best way to do something like that, to have those themes and kind of grapple with them and have different things point off from different angles in that regard. It's so very well written in that regard. You have to have those qualities so much to really bring out what the story is so much about, instead of just horror here or there, kind of dark things kind of scrambling around all over the place, jumping at you with bloodshot eyes. Have a substance to it, and that's so much what the substance of the art film is, where it gets so much up to that point. It really much shows what the entire film is very much delving into and trying to bring out of its characters, and also trying to shade them to certain degrees with these soldiers in that regard. Though not all of them are terribly up on that game. There's one of them there that's kind of a little bit veering off the entire thing, is still kind of trying to maintain certain sense of righteousness in that regard, but the fact is, Jim has become what he has become to kind of go back against these guys and take them down to be able to save the people he cares about, because obviously these people just have no sensibility or whatnot about that. And I like so much the fact when you get into the entire tapestry of the story here and all the themes in that regard, I like so much that one point in time when Jim's laid out in the middle of the forest in that regard, and he's looking up at the sky and he sees a plane flying across overhead. That's the one signal that there's still a civilization out there. It's the one sign that they have. There's some sense of normalcy still out there to get back to. I like so much that they added that thing in, and they charter their own plane, they get everything set up at the exact point in time with the camera, they get that one shot there. It's not something they just accidentally came upon. They plotted out that exact moment in the entire film here to make sure they got the exact shot to show it upon Jim and convey it over to Cillian and Hannah and stuff like that later on, to show that sort of quality, to move into the climax and the ending of the film, which was a bit in flux to a certain degree, because the original ending was the fact that Cillian and Hannah bring Jim, who's got the gunshot, over to this hospital and do their best to try to save him, but they can't. And there's a bit of a contention how the intention of the scene at the end was supposed to be sort of like, they're two tough women, they're survivors, they'll be able to survive this whether or not they have Jim or not. And people just kind of didn't quite get that from how it was conveyed on screen. It just felt a little bit nihilistic, felt a little bit of them walking out to their doom type of thing. So they eventually reworked it twice. They shot two other versions, or actually shot on film itself, 35 millimeter, and they actually did the proper ending they did on the entire film, when they have Jim still alive and they're bringing out the tarps and everything like that to kind of show off this sort of sign to the jet that's flying overhead. The other version of the ending was just basically the same thing, but Jim wasn't present. He did die, but you still have a bit more optimistic end there with Hannah and Cillian there. But I think the one they landed on was kind of the best quality, because you had so much, again, bleakness, so much darkness, so many bad things happening in the entire film. It's nice to see a spark of hope when you have these characters survive through the darkest of circumstances and have them come out the other end of it. I like so much what the film does on these regards. The fact that, one, the effects are fantastic, and there's not a lot of effects, but there's a lot of gore, a lot of makeup done, a lot of the blood or whatnot, just like make all these infected look absolutely terrifying, and the body language overall sells it so much is just the chaotic frenzy they have on screen is so effective to make them just terrifying on a base level in that regard. I like so much what they've done with the thematic material overall, the substance entire thing, the characters having so much of a dimensionality to them, bringing such great actors overall to these characters to really bring so much to it. It's a fantastic film. I saw this in the theater in 2003, and I was just absolutely blown away. Just like I was so impressed with what they were done here, even though I feel like maybe in that kind of middle section there, where they're kind of on the road and kind of going along and they're kind of in the fields and stuff like that, it feels like it's a little, the pacing's kind of grinded to a halt. And I know they're kind of doing certain things with quality of character and seeing other different qualities of the nature around them. I just feel like it kind of grinds a little slow to a certain degree right before you get up to the army barracks and stuff like that. But overall, when you get to that climax, so intense. Just like how they do so many different sequences here. Even how they have the guy get unchained and he's running around all infected and he's attacking everyone else and turning everyone else as well. And have all these sequences where even some people we actually care about, like Hannah, she's cowering behind that mirror so much. And the one of them is just so close. And you're not sure exactly what's going to happen the whole thing. It's great stuff, just like they use the horror and the tension and the atmosphere so much. All these dark, shadowy type of things with such great camera angles, such great moments overall. Just like it's such a great sensibility of how Danny Boyle can just adapt to all these different genres, the different styles needed to tell all these different stories. Like these so many very sort of sensibilities and tensions and aspects of dramatic filmmaking has to employ in every different thing and kind of approach it in different ways. Such a versatile filmmaker, just so much that he can pretty much do whatever he wants to and do it so much fantastic in that regard. So, such a great film. I never saw the sequel 28 weeks later, but apparently Danny Boyle and Alex Garland made a deal with Sony, who now acquired the rights to the original film, to actually do it 28 years later. So this has actually been stirring up and kind of developing in the last couple of years in that regard. And so the main reason why the film is out of print on DVD and Blu-ray, it's not available on streaming, is because Disney and 20th Century Studios lost the distribution rights to the film, have now been acquired by Sony. And so I imagine in due time it will get recirculated out there to digital platforms. They'll probably maybe they'll do a new master. It's hard to kind of improve it that much, but obviously when you look at the DVD, some edge enhancement here and there. There's some things they could kind of a little bit fine-tune at this point in time, kind of get a little bit more out of the entire thing. Maybe scan it from a film print or something else they did in that regard, but they could do some minor improvements here and there, just make it a little bit better in that regard, a little bit more up to standards, have a lot of a 20-year-old DVD master, a little bit of a better thing in that regard, but it will come back out in circulation. People can talk about it in recent times. It's not available here and there and everywhere. It will come back out now that it's in Sony's hands. They'll eventually redistribute it. But guys, if you've enjoyed and experienced 28 Days Later, I definitely want to hear what you feel about the entire film. Like I said, I saw it in the theater back in 2003. I've not revisited it many times, but the fact of the matter is, the film is so impactful. It's so powerful what it does with its imagery and its storytelling, all the different qualities it has in its arsenal of things. Even though I've watched it very seldom amount of times, it's maintained a very strong presence in my head of exactly what the film was, how it impacted me, everything it had going on, the whole thing. So across the board with such fantastic qualities and so many great talents injected into this film, I think it is an absolute classic and definitely deserves to be maintained in the conversation of some of the best horror films that have been put together, especially in this genre, this offshoot from the zombie genre, to take a much more realistic approach to it that feels, again, very potent after we've had the last couple of years of our lives here dealing with the pandemic and close downs and people kind of sheltered and stuff like that and kind of dealing with infectious diseases. Very much a potent film in that regard, just like it still transcends its origins in that regard and just maintains a very strong foothold in the minds of people who've watched it and experienced it. So guys, thanks so much. There's always a super thanks feature to kind of contribute something to the channel directly. Also Patreon to get a little early access to everything in that regard. Subscribe if you haven't, hit the notification bell to make sure you get notifications of every time there's an upload on the channel. And of course, liking and commenting, all that type of stuff, and sharing the links around helps this channel grow so very much. So guys, depends on you a lot. I very much appreciate you so much, interacting on the channel so much. So guys, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.